Hickok 45. Welcome to the Hickok 45 Talks channel. This just came to me as I was out here messing around, and I haven't prepared for it. Sorry about that. I should have if I'm going to talk about historical events and that sort of thing. I'm not a historian, but I have interest in a lot of areas. And I made a note months ago about the most famous Civil War sniper, and that I said I ought to tell that story since I live near there, relatively near. And maybe I remember just enough to spark a little interest if you have interest in that kind of thing. I've always had well, not always, since about, I don't know, probably when I moved to Franklin, Tennessee, that probably was a bit of a spark. Because I grew up in northern Kentucky, and that's not exactly a hotbed for Civil War history. But when I came down here, Tennessee, and in Franklin, Tennessee in '73 and taught out there, and my first job teaching was on a Civil War battleground. It was at Battleground Academy, an old school. Then I think I got a little more interested in it because I couldn't help but learn the history of that. And I read a couple of books about the Battle of Franklin and how it all happened right there. And you're out at lunch hour, the kids are out running around there on the campus, and they're coming back. Look what I found, Mr. A mini ball, where they've been working on the football field in the spring, and they'd turn up mini balls because that was where the fierce fighting took place, right there in the Battle of Franklin, right on Battle Avenue in Main Street. Not Main Street, was it? Well, it's 31, that runs right through Franklin. But Battleground Academy, the old campus where I taught, was right there on the kind of the south end of town. Now it's on kind of the north end of town. They moved. But that probably sparked my interest initially. And then I have, over the years, visited a lot of Civil War battlefields and read various books and accounts of the battles. I just find it interesting. I enjoy the black powder firearms and, the Civil War rifle muskets I have that I've shown you. Not enough of you have seen. I find it interesting. I'm by no means an expert. I don't study it thoroughly. As usual, jack of all trades, master of none. I admit that all the time. There's just too much stuff in life to study and too many interesting things to go too deep on, on one for me. Don't have enough time, enough intellect. But I've been to like Fort Sumter, Chickamauga, my gosh, Shiloh, Gettysburg. I probably could Donaldson. What others? I'm leaving out so many. Down on the Mississippi River. I always forget the name of that town. Up on the kind of the bluff that Grant took. Tip of my tongue, but you know what I'm talking about. And then, of course, down on further south down there was, well, that wasn't Shiloh. That was, I will draw a blank on that. But anyway, I've been to a lot of the battlefields, and good thing before I get fully developed Alzheimer's, right? And Battle of Franklin, of course, I lived there, worked there. And Donaldson is one of the interesting ones, I think. I live up northern side of Tennessee now, Middle Tennessee. I'm closer to Donaldson and go up that way quite often. Used to drive up to Dixie Gun Works pretty often and go through there. And just anything, you going to Dover and around, we just pull up into the Donaldson battle site there. And just it's a nice park. It's on the river. A neat cannon, set up there, just pretty much like it was during the battle. And anyway, that was kind of the gateway for Grant to get into the South. He went westward down, I guess, the Ohio, and then into the Cumberland River and Tennessee River, and took those two forts, Donaldson and Henry, and all that story up in there, and getting on down into Clarksville and Nashville. But he was, all that was really instrumental in, in winning the war, really, for the North. But anyway, Donaldson is an interesting place, and I guess, it was after they had won the battles there and established that area, the Union did. there were still renegades, obviously Southern sympathizers and whatever rebels, and they would ambush the Union troops at times, and so a typical, war's hell, as they say, right? So many people, innocent people and otherwise, killed and in their sleep and everything else in these border states and places of Kansas, Missouri, this tough stuff, and so anyway, and nothing's ever black and white or clean, so lots of violence occurred even after that major battle was over with, right? So there'd be ambushes on the Union troops would be going on maneuvers around there, whatever, and they would be ambushes, and so the Union was losing. They would lose troops to ambush occasionally, snipers or whatever. Well, they finally laid down the law, and they were tired of getting bushwhacked, and they kind of developed a no tolerance policy. And anybody that even looked like they might be a bushwhacker, whatever, they were going to be strung up or something, stuff. Well, this is kind of violent to talk about, but you're adults, right? There were, Jack Hinson lived up there in Dover. I think he's a little north of Dover. Had a plantation, a big place. And he had stayed neutral through the war. He was determined to stay neutral, and pretty much did, and stay out of it. He stayed out of it, but anyway, at this point, he had 2 or 3 sons, and a couple of his sons, they were like 18 and 21 or something. They were out hunting one morning during this period, and some Union troops came upon them and thought they were bushwhackers. And you had to be there, I guess, to know what exactly might have been the case. But anyway, they killed his 2 sons, beheaded them, took their heads back and put them on Hinson's gatepost. Okay? Is that about as morbid as you can, and violent as you can imagine? So how do you think Jack Hinson reacted to that? Yeah, so we can't even imagine that kind of horror, devastation. So that's, and again, I'm an amateur relating this. I've read the book. That doesn't mean anything. You can tell I can't even remember some of the battlefields. I'm so dumb. But anyway, he still maintained his independence and tried not to overreact. But he took to studying. He had some means. He was fairly wealthy. He did his research and tracked the, well, first I think he had a rifle made, a 50 caliber rifle, state-of-the-art muzzleloader rifle made, like custom gunsmith. And he tracked the maneuverings and figured out who it was that killed his sons exactly. He sniped them. He got them, got even. And he didn't continue, and then he didn't stop there. He continued. And it got suspicious to the point where he had to leave. And they eventually burned his house and everything once they kind of realized it was him and all that. But he hid out in a cave, or hid out across the river, and he stayed in a cave up on the Tennessee River. And there was a place on the Tennessee River before the dams were built like they are today. They called it land between the rivers back then. And there was a very narrow place on the Tennessee River where it was difficult getting up that river, that stream. It was very shallow and very narrow. And just right above there on the bluff, there was a cave and some rocks and everything. And he hid out up there, and he would target officers. He'd look for the brass. He targeted officers, and I don't figure what the estimate is. How many soldiers, officers he killed I think it's over 100. He is considered the greatest sniper of all time, I think, or something, or at least he held that title for a while. His name was Jack Hinson, I believe is correct. That rifle, some guy in Murfreesboro, a historian or a professor down at Middle Tennessee, I think still has that rifle still in the area and goes around and does talks about it and everything and gives the stories about him. And just a fascinating story that's true, that's absolutely true. And I was trying to think of the title of the book. It was Jack Hinson's War on something, but anyway, you can Google it. It's a good read. It's interesting. If you have any interest in history, kind of thing. And I always think it's also a good example of the old walk softly and carry a big stick, or be careful what hornet's nest you stir up. You know, there's all kinds of examples of situations where people were just wanting to mind their own business, but somebody, some group, some government, whatever, would not allow them to mind their own business and leave them alone. You be careful what you stir up. Little did they know what they stirred up when they committed that atrocity, you know, his sons. And just talk about a lesson learned. That really is one, right? So anyway, I don't know. I just got off on all that, but I've always been interested in there's something. I guess it ties into my interest in those historical firearms. You hold a Colt single action. It was made in the 1880s, like my U.S. model, you know, or my Civil War musket rifles that were used in the Civil War. Just feeling that was, you know, wishing it could speak, and knowing that it was actually used. Same feeling you get when you visit a battlefield to some extent, you know, or a fort. Yeah, you walk around Fort Sumter or any of them. I've been to a lot of the seaports and different things. Knowing what happened there is just something else. It just really is. It's just interesting to me that happened right on our land, right here where we walk and drive. These things, you know, happen. Where I lived in Franklin for several years, about 10 years, I lived in Franklin. I had a log house up on a hill during some of my single years out there, and that was right where, you know, Hood came through, coming north, just before the Battle of Franklin, up the Columbia Pike. So, you know, and people had found, someone had told me they found that lived there before, found a belt buckle up behind my house, buried, you know, that kind of thing, a Civil War belt buckle. So anyway, you're kind of steeped in that history down here in this part of the country. And there's another battlefield I'm trying to think of that I've been to. A lot of small ones, Mill Springs up in Kentucky, and I've seen reenactments. Perryville, Kentucky. I've seen a couple of great reenactments there, and I've shared some of that on Facebook. You've seen pictures of that. So I'm not a nut about it. I don't constantly read about it. I've got Shelby Foote's books and keep meaning to dig more into those. But I again, jack of all trades. But I find it interesting, and many of you do as well, I'm sure. So for what it's worth, I don't know, just throwing that out there, it's an area of interest to me, and probably some of you would find it interesting. You know, visit some of these Civil War battlefields and find out what happened there. It's pretty interesting, and some of them I find more interesting than others. Donelson especially. It's just really clear cut what happened right there, and I mean, not much has changed right there, that river, and you know, the cannon emplacements and everything. You just sort of imagine, you know, what happened as the Union came down the river. So anyway, for whatever that's worth, which ain't much, that's all I got to say. Life is good.